everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of Commerce Meets Law, a podcast where we talk about various commercial topics and how they interact with the legal profession. Before I talk about this week's episode, I really hope that you enjoyed last week's episode where I spoke a little bit about my journey over the last 3 years at the University of Exeter. It was a slightly different episode for Commerce Meets Law. I haven't done a solo episode in a really long time, but I really wanted to document that journey, one for myself because I found it quite therapeutic in a way, but also for any of you thinking about studying law, thinking about going to university or going to Exeter. I hope that, if you were in any of those buckets, that you found it useful. If after that episode you had any more questions, please feel free to leave them down below in the comments of this episode or the last episode, or even through Instagram. I'd be really happy to either do a part 2 or answer you directly on that. But let's talk about this week's episode because it's an exciting one. This week's episode is a conversation that I've been waiting to bring on to Commerce Meets Law for a really long time. And it's with none other than Patricia Gannon. So Patricia is the founder and CEO of Platforum9, a social audio app built exclusively for lawyers, dedicated to connecting the legal community worldwide and democratizing access to legal content and opportunities. With over 3 decades of expertise in the legal profession, Patricia has worked with top-tier corporate law firms across Ireland and Europe and served in the European Commission. Later, she established her own law firm that grew into the largest full-service law firm in the Balkans and ran that for over 2 decades. Today, she's channeling her passion for law and belief in the power of technology into her startup, Platforum9, to create an inclusive platform for legal professionals to engage, learn, and grow together. That is a big message that we're trying to channel here at Commerce Meets Law. So I was so excited to bring on Patricia, especially because she shares a similar vision and is trying to do something similar with Platform9. So in this episode, we firstly discuss Patricia's journey to securing a training contract and serving in the European Commission, because that's just such an incredible experience. Then why she moved to the Balkans and the journey to establishing the largest full-service law firm in that region, which is such an incredible story and I cannot wait for you to hear it. And after a successful stint there for 25 years, we talk about how she successfully pivoted from being a law firm partner to establishing herself once again as a founder within the legal tech space. What gap Platform9, the social audio app that she is the founder of, is filling in the legal industry and how it works. I really tried to get into the nitty-gritty of it, especially from the perspective of someone who is considering being a member of the app because they're either a student or an aspiring lawyer. So I really hope that you find that part useful. And finally, Patricia's ambitions for the future of the platform. If you enjoyed this conversation and are in the legal industry, I would really urge you to check out the app, and I'll link it down below so you can definitely check it out. It is a fantastic initiative and is going to be so beneficial to anyone who wants to learn from the experience of some of the most brilliant minds in law. Just a quick request before I get into the conversation. I really appreciate if you could kindly give the podcast a follow and a rating on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, as it really helps Commerce Meets Law reach more listeners. Without further ado, I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you right at the end. Hi Patricia, and welcome to Commerce Meets Law. Very excited to talk to you today and learn all about your journey up to getting to this point and starting Platform9 and all of your various projects over the last couple of years. So before we start any podcast episode, we have a bit of an icebreaker, which is, in your opinion, what is your superpower?
Superpower. Well, I'm super high energy. I'm powerful because I have a lot of energy. All through my life, I've been sort of bouncy and running around and sort of full of energy. I'm blessed with energy, but I think my superpower would be bringing people together, connecting people, connecting the dots. I really enjoy doing that. I think I'm kind of good at it.
I love that, and I think that is what I sort of gathered from reading about your work and everything you're doing at the moment as well. So that's amazing that you're channeling that superpower into helping other people within the legal profession. And speaking of law, when was law kind of the first time when you came into contact with the legal profession and thought that this might be a route for you? When did that first become a possibility?
Well, I'm probably going to date myself terribly here, but you might have heard of a series called Ally McBeal. There was a US, you know how the Americans do these
Oh
wonderful
yeah.
TV shows now, Suits or whatever. There's a whole lot of these American TV shows that, that sort of illustrate what it is like to be a lawyer. I mean, in a fictional legal world, obviously it's not like that at all. But I was probably 12 or 13 when I was attracted to the idea of doing something which looked like helping people, but also it was changing all of the time. So this idea of being able to sort of communicate, use the tool of the law to solve problems, fix things, represent people. I think that was what appealed to me even back then. Although there's nobody in my family who's a lawyer, so it's not like I came from a legal background. So yeah, probably 12, 13 is when I decided, yeah, I think I want to be a solicitor in particular.
I like that. And is that something that convinced you particularly within the commercial realm, or was that something you came into contact with onto at university and you thought, okay, there's good opportunity here?
I studied law in Trinity College in Dublin.
Hmm.
It's a lovely place to study law, Trinity was. There was about 66 of us in the class. So lovely small group, very innovative teachers, teachers who were at the cutting edge of human rights. Two of my professors became presidents of Ireland. The first female Irish president was Mary Robinson, who was my professor of European law. And so just being inspired by particularly women in law, even back then, was huge. Mary, who was really not expected to win, to turn around, do a political campaign and become, as a lawyer, the first Irish female president, and then followed shortly after by Mary McAleese, who was my professor for criminal law. From Belfast, wonderful woman. And I think it's just been wonderful having those role models in my life from the very early stage. So I did not intend necessarily to be a commercial lawyer. Life took me down that path, and I followed it.
Wow, I love that. And I think, especially, like you talked about, role models are so important. And I think you have now become role models for so many people, whether that is entering the world of business or entering the world of law, and knowing that they can be in those positions and then they can achieve those dreams. And I think that people like you, and for you, your role model at university meant that you felt like you could follow that passion, and that's absolutely incredible. In terms of the journey to getting a training contract, it's something that people talk about a lot because it can have its own challenges, and I think every decade those challenges change as well, but they remain challenges. So what was your journey to getting a training contract, and what hurdles did you face along the way?
Even though it was some time ago, it was still a
Yeah.
challenge. We were all competing for a training contract, and at a time called an apprenticeship in Ireland, which was a 3-year program
Okay.
following on from your law degree, which
Mm.
required certain periods of time spent down at the Law Society doing the specific exams, the professional exams, which are all named differently now. But it was a 3-year program. The process was, selecting the firms that were interesting for you, that were hiring larger numbers,
Mm.
commercial firms in particular, because back then, many firms did not pay their trainees at all, and some still don't, which is
Mm.
remarkable. And
Yeah.
I needed, as somebody who was self-financing, I needed to be paid. So I only applied to law firms that were going to pay me, and luckily managed to get through on an interview. Also because I had been the president of the European Law Students Association in Ireland, and I had done a lot of extracurricular activities, including working with said Irish President Mary Robinson in the Irish Centre for European Law. So, for anybody listening and for people of your generation, really important, even when you're in faculty, that you're doing other things that enhance your skill set, like the confidence when you're doing those interviews that you've done something more than just sit in the library and read a book.
And there's also a big transition from going from being a student and completing your law degree to then actually starting as a trainee. So can you tell us about that transition and some challenges you faced comparing the two?
I mean, it's huge. Ultimately, you walk into a law firm really feeling that, you know nothing, and that the 3 or 4 years you spent on your legal education has been a complete waste of time. So bear in mind, it's a parallel universe between the academic life of learning the law into the practical life of applying it. So if you're lucky, you'll have a team that will be patient with you, that will recognize that it's a very alien world for you. and they'll be patient with their expectations. Quite often, there was baptism of fire was the philosophy that probably we grew up with, which
Yeah.
was throw them in the deep end and let's see if they sink or swim. Today, in an anxious world, I think that would be not appropriate, and I think
Mm.
find that really, really challenging. And I don't necessarily think it's the best way to learn because you're so overwhelmed and threatened and insecure and anxious that making decisions is super difficult. An example I'll use is, being brought along, for example, to a banking and finance negotiation over a loan agreement where, as the trainee at the end of the table, the partner who, took me with them just to see what it all looked like, and I was told happily to just take notes, and the challenge with taking notes is that you've got to identify what's important and what's not important and what's going on around you. But the language that was being used was so alien to my vocabulary that it was just trying to hold on and cling on to what are they talking about here? What are they trying to achieve? And what is the important detail that I'm supposed to remember and report back to the partner, right? So huge challenges in terms of expectations. So be prepared if, for any of you guys, coming out of faculty, be prepared to feel like a complete idiot when you get into practice. I think you're not alone. Remember, you're not alone. Everybody else is in the same boat. They're faking it a little bit, to be honest. If they're super confident, it's not real. They're just faking it, right? Which comes in time. You only really get the confidence through learning and getting the experience where you do achieve it. And if, as I said, you're lucky and get a training contract with an organization that genuinely supports your personal growth as well as your professional growth, you're in the right place. If people are either bullying you, which is not unheard of in legal, or overburdening you, not giving you enough time to deliver a work product, quite often the expectations are far too unrealistic. You need to look out for that. So there were many, many challenges. Working for difficult people is a challenge. Not everybody is easy to work for. There are bullies out there, believe it or not, there are bullies out there, and you need to find the tools to be able to deal with them and still learn and grow and develop. Lots of fun and games in a law firm.
Absolutely. And I think, like you say, that there's workplaces of all kinds, but I also think that people need to go in with their eyes wide open of, having that realistic expectation that, yes, there are going to be different types of people. And yes, not everyone may be as friendly as you are or as open as you are, or be willing to take feedback as much as you are. So I think that, having that realistic perspective is such a key one as well, for sure. What seat did you end up qualifying into, and how did you make that decision that that's the route you wanted to choose?
We did. We obviously we do commercial, we do real estate, we do banking and finance, litigation. I
Yeah.
quite like litigation, but I did end up, for other reasons, in very much on the commercial side. If I was to choose, I liked transactions. I like the activity and the teamwork in M&A work because it's high pressure, but it's very real and tangible. I also really enjoyed dispute resolution. That was really interesting. And in fact, yesterday on the app, we did a session on international arbitration, and I'm still fascinated by dispute resolution mechanisms. So they're very real and tangible. Other practice areas, they're also real and tangible, but a lot of it's very advisory oriented, whether it's data protection or IP or whatever. So I kind of like the chunky parts where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you see the success at the end. I quite enjoy that.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I did my vacuums talking to people in litigation, and a lot of times that was what they enjoyed most about it. They liked the fact that, I think it was a bit more structured compared to a transactional seat, which could have its huge peaks and huge troughs when you're, working 2 a.m. every night, and then you're going home at 4 p.m. for a couple of weeks, and then the journey starts again, compared to litigation, which had that storyline. There was a bit more structure to it. And then I think that, there's no right or wrong, but it's really you figure out what kind of person you are and what you enjoy as well. What I really want to get onto before we talk about Platform 9 is you setting up your own law firm, because I think that, again, it's such a bold move, and I want to talk a little bit about that journey because it was a part of your life for such a long time as well. So how did that decision kind of come about? How did you think, you know what, I'm gonna go do it on my own?
Well, ultimately would never have done it. So life journey, finish my my training contract in Dublin at a commercial firm. And from day one, because I'd been heavily involved in the European Law Students Association, where I was president, I really wanted to have an European experience. So as part of my traineeship, I spent 6 months at a multidisciplinary firm based in Munich, which is
Mm.
interesting because I didn't speak very good German at the time. And I remember, attending these meetings. And that was very interesting because a multidisciplinary firm was something we couldn't have in Ireland and England at the time, where you had, tax advisors and auditors and lawyers all working together under one roof. And that was allowed under German law. So for me, that was super interesting because I thought it was very efficient. And I think if we look at some of the trends and some of the traits that matter to me, efficiency is definitely one of them. And I thought this was a great way in which you bring together people holistically around serving the client, because the client has many, many different issues, and we're very siloed as professional services. We're siloed in how we deal with the client. So I thought that was fun. And then yeah, I accidentally married a Serb, so I moved to Serbia, where I had a very, very interesting 20 years. Unexpected, but circumstances took me to a place I thought I would never be. With my degree, what was I going to do? So it was a real challenge. And politically, it was war,
Mm.
bombing, sanctions, you name it. So it was a very, very challenging time externally. But then once that sort of, once we sort of got to a peace agreement, the Dayton Peace Agreement, everything had to be done in rebuilding these economies. So that was an amazing journey. Not a single real law firm in the country. So we built what became the largest law firm in the former Yugoslavia, now with 250 lawyers in 8 markets. So fully integrated services. But simply that happened because of the fact that these countries were just born. We were there at day one, and nobody could really do what we were doing. And the World Bank came in and was privatizing companies, and then lots of foreign direct investment was coming in, lots of infrastructure work, lots of banking and finance, obviously financing the infrastructure work, lots of, so huge amount of work to be done. So we grew and we ran for 20 years, building that firm. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. And especially, growing up in Ireland and then moving all the way to Falklands, I think that's a big change, obviously personally, but then
Huge.
professionally as well.
Huge.
Um,
And didn't speak
yeah.
the language. So that was also a challenge. Pick up the language along the way. Again, I was young. What can I say? Young, and but I have no regrets in the sense that wrong time, wrong place can eventually become the right time, right place. If
Mm.
so, again, little messages for people that might be listening to you is, you're not stuck where you are. There's always opportunity. The question is to learn, to use your mindset, to learn what you can where you are, and then apply it to something else if you need to.
Going from, having just qualified to the point where you're running your own law firm and successfully so for 20 years, what were some of the lessons you learned along the way of the difference between, I guess, working as, a bit of like a cog in a system in a sense of you are part of a machine that eventually leads to the conclusion versus, doing something of your own and having people under you? What was that transition like?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, because I was quite lucky because I was a foreign lawyer in a jurisdiction where there were very few foreign lawyers. So
Mm.
because I'd worked in a structured commercial firm in Dublin, I understood what a structure looked like. I understood what a pitch looked like. I understood what billing looked like, how you built departments. I mean, all of that stuff that came naturally in and comes naturally in our world was not natural in that world back then. So bringing
Mm.
that knowledge base in, I already knew a little bit, building a business, business development, business generation is something that I think came naturally to me. I like networking, as I said earlier. I like putting people together, and that kind of went nicely. The learning curves were about people management, hiring the right people, motivating the right people, being ahead. I like being ahead of the curve all the time. I will always try to be ahead, anticipate what's coming next, watch what's going on around you, evaluate what's going on in the economy, new practice areas, new regulation that you can, build a little niche practice out of, being aware of the world in which you're operating, number one. So that takes time, effort, and energy, but also a little bit of a mindset. Quite often, people can be a little bit passive about where they are and they're sort of reactive. I'm just
Mm.
suggesting you need to think a little bit more. The world is changing very quickly, and then anticipate, and then get your skill set together, and be ideally one of the early movers. Because when you are, you can build up your reputation very easily. So being the only foreign lawyer in the country was meant that I was instantly recognizable. So, I remember going to Freshfields, for many, many years. We did a lot of work for all of the global firms because they were not present in our region and they had clients that were active there. I remember going to Freshfields and, they recognized me as, that poor Irish girl in the Balkans. Is she still there? That's how I was known, and that sort of story then sort of became, oh, right, well, that's somebody you can talk to because they know what they're talking about, and they'll give you valuable advice, practical advice also on jurisdictions. So in terms of building the firm itself, it was about scaling. Like we quadrupled the number of lawyers year one, growth, 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 growth. I think once you get to a certain stage, you then need to put in a marketing team, a HR function. There's a certain point where you need those third party professionals. Otherwise, as partners, frankly, you don't have the skill set. You don't have the skill set. You're
Yeah.
not good at it. So don't do it if you can avoid it. So just give it to the people who know what they're doing and allow them to
Yeah.
do their job. So that was something that we did kind of quite early. We specialized quite early. We set clear targets for our lawyers quite early, met clear, measurable, transparent targets. So there was an element of fairness, pay people, treat them well. These are obvious things, but you'd be surprised how many law firms don't get that right.
From the client perspective, you mentioned that when you went over to the Balkans, there was a lot of, there was instability, or the same stability that was seen in the West. There were a lot of issues that were already going on. How did you go about getting clients and convincing them that your services were required, and that it would be beneficial, it would be a net benefit to them at the time?
Yeah, super interesting question. We did a lot of, as I said, referral work for most global law firms.
Right.
So for any global firm who had a client looking at either buying a factory, building an airport, or, major work was being done in these markets. They were desperate to make sure they had a decent local team who spoke English well, who understood the quality of providing a service. So, from heavily involvement with the International Bar Association from day one was key, because that is where we met colleagues from all over the world.
Right.
And they were looking for very quickly getting ourselves ranked as tier one in Chambers, Legal 500, and all of the directories. So a clear strategy about making sure you had the right people who were serious professionals, supporting them in their professional development to make sure that they were on top of their practice. And then, making sure that you were promoting them and the practice, through the business development programs, through the networking in London and elsewhere, meeting those law firms. The clients themselves, we would also approach the clients directly, but quite often they were coming through the law firms, the
Right.
international firms.
That's super interesting, and like you say, I mean, what an amazing transition to go from having just qualified to that point, and really growing that firm. Anyone listening to it will be thinking, wow, that's an incredible story, and already what a success. But your journey didn't stop there. 20 years later, you decided that actually it was time for a new challenge. You were going to do something else. What inspired that reason, and what were the factors that played in where you thought, actually it's time for me to do something else?
Absolutely. I guess this is pre-COVID, the personal journey ended in the Balkans, so moved on, happily moved on. And my children had grown up. It was like a certain stage of life where I thought, okay, so what am I going to do now? And I spent quite some time, analyzing myself, my own personal motivations, what mattered to me. And from day one, what had always mattered to me was making sure that younger colleagues got access to the experience that I got as a younger colleague, which was, two meetings, two international, networks and forums. And I just felt that there's a gap there in terms of the hierarchy that exists currently in the legal profession. It's quite difficult, although the world is a lot more available to you in terms of the internet and everything, you have access that way, but to actually get live experiences and live access to build your own network, your own book of business at an early stage, you don't get as much of that. It's usually more
Mm.
senior people in firms. And I felt it would be so much more empowering for people of your generation being able to, build your own network, build your own little book of business. You're much more powerful also in the profession if you can, on your partnership track, if that's something that you want, but at least on your promotion track, being able to demonstrate that, this is what I do in terms of the technical work, and this is why I'm an excellent lawyer and why you should continue to promote me and whatever. But what they're also looking for is they're looking for people that can build the business with them, particularly in law firms. In-house also, I mean, but in a different way. So being able to demonstrate that you're not just technically good, that you actually understand the business of law, you understand how to generate clients, you understand how to look after those clients, and you have, so you're promoting yourself, but you need to be confident in doing so, and you need to have the evidence. They're not just going to promote you for the sake of it, right? So I think that's something that I felt at an early stage. It's much more fun. You're much more integrated as a lawyer. You understand holistically what it means to be a lawyer. If you can build the business, if you can have the clients calling you for answers, if you understand the billing, you understand how to put together a team, you understand how to manage the workflow, all of that stuff makes you a perfect lawyer, a very, very valuable lawyer. And that's why I felt it's important to build those skills, which is why we've now built Platform9, which I'll tell you about in a minute.
Yes, absolutely. And that is, something that I really want to get onto because all the work that you're doing there is so exciting. But just on that point of understanding the business of law, not just the technical side, I think as well with the limited experience that I've had, I think it's very apparent sometimes when a partner is just, you can just tell the reason why they're a partner. And that's not just because their technical knowledge is so good, but it's actually because they can manage people really well. They can talk to clients in a way that is convincing, and yet, is a way where they're selling their services in an honest way, but they're selling it to a client and they're marketing their services. And I think those people skills and those marketing skills are the stuff you don't really learn at university and you don't learn when you're a trainee. It's something that you kind of have to develop either through observation or on your own, or you have to do courses. And that's maybe sometimes where the gap is between people who may be technically very sound, but may not be on the partnership track because they don't have those other skills. And with Gannon Advisory, I think, you were talking about the emphasis on women particularly as well. Do you feel like there's a gap in the sense of that being the reason why there are still fewer women who get promoted to partner? Would you say that that's a reason behind it?
Well, I think, and this may sound a little controversial, but I just think we don't bullshit as well. And
Yeah, I agree.
tend to be more analytical. We tend to be even more averse. We tend to want to perform better, to be excellent, and not, sort of let me get back to you, rather than do it on the spot and come across super confidently, it'll be let me double check and get back to you, which sort of somehow indicates that you're not fully on top of it, which might, whereas quite often I've seen with my male partners, male colleagues, is they will quite happily walk into it and, fluff and not necessarily be called out in the fluff, and then sort of come back to you, oh yeah, that wasn't quite like that. So I think there's an attitude issue, even though I think it is getting better, but not fundamentally. I mean, we still have to work very, very hard, I think, to convince ourselves that we absolutely are legitimately at the table, and to and to look and feel more confident ultimately. And these are from childhood. Ultimately, this is something that's very, very difficult to do. You have to work really hard on it in your later years. If you haven't had that upbringing as a child where you were absolutely super confident or whatever, it's kind of challenging. So yes, these skills we have to work on. And I think safer places for women just alone. I mean, we've talked about this quite often throughout my entire career, as I was the sole female partner in my firm at the time. It was challenging. It's quite interesting. Also, the mansplaining is quite remarkable when you say something and then your colleague just say exactly the same thing in his
Yeah.
words. For some reason that is listened to. And then, sort of women are going, but I just said that, it's quite interesting to observe, and it's frustrating a little bit. And which is why I think we need to learn how to communicate way more effectively, way more confidently, and we need to support each other in doing it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. I think, there's surveys after surveys of so many examples of that, of, why do men feel more confident asking for a pay rise or actually saying that, yes, I deserve to be paid more, I deserve to be promoted and have that responsibility. And women may have the same level of capability or even more, but that imposter syndrome gets to you, or that ability of like, oh, am I capable of doing this? Can I do this? Even though they've probably already done it even before they've been promoted. They've shown that they've got that work ethic, and that they can get there. And so much of that bridge isn't your technical ability, it's just your communication and your ability to market yourself. So I think for sure, like you say, it's a problem that is a systemic one, and we need to try and break down that barrier. And it's definitely happening, but we're not there yet. I think that there's a long way to go.
Who knows? I just think rather than, and again, sort of the fact that I happen to be a girl, I really didn't affect my career. I just got on with it. So I
Yeah.
think, whilst I understand there's a lot of focus on the challenges that women face in the workplace, in any case, I think we should focus at what could be our professional advantages. And communication is something, and confidence building is another, where if we can work on that alone, and become more effective, effective as in, we get what we want when we communicate it, and kind of communicators,
Yeah.
I think a lot of work needs to be put into that for sure.
Alongside community and communication, the part I think that you're playing here with Platform 9 is so key. So I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about what you're trying to achieve through it. So for anyone who's not come across it before, can you tell us a little bit about what Platform 9 is and how that journey began?
Well, Platform 9 is an app that lawyers or anybody in the legal profession can join, which connects you with a community of people like yourself. So it's a curated content using voice. So we're here on a podcast with a video. If you can imagine, we take away the video, which makes it easier. Back to the efficiency, it makes it easier for you when you're on the move, when you're not able to be on the video because you're in your pajamas or you're walking the dog. It's a convenience tool that allows you to feel connected with your colleagues around certain practice areas or issues that matter to you. So it's called Platform 9 because it is a platform made of forums, and those forums are communities of lawyers who connect, ideally weekly, about their practice area. So there are 9 sort of universal topics. We came up with this name: health, tech, trade, deals, energy, property, infrastructure, resources, and rights. So we break these down across the
Mhm.
world. We have moderators who are thought leaders who are building communities. We've got about 1,000 lawyers on the app right now. We just went live in February this year. We're growing month on month, and it's interesting to watch where we're growing and how we're growing. It's a lot of fun. But the idea is, in particular for younger lawyers like yourselves, if you don't make it to a live conference, because quite often you either are not sent there by your boss who spends the money, or you're too busy with making your targets, and quite often you're overlooked. And it's an opportunity to be part of a community in a way that suits you. So our sessions they're live, they're recorded, they're transcribed from voice to text, and they're summarized with AI, which means that if you want a live experience, you come on, you join us, you raise your hand, you ask questions. So it's an opportunity to get direct feedback and direct output from thought leaders or others in that community who want to share with you. That's the one experience. For those of you who don't make it live, there's the recording, which then allows you just to listen in as you're doing other things like everything else. The summaries are literally that what I need to do on Monday, the real quick fix. What do I take out of this half an hour? Usually we're doing sort of, our content is usually 30-35 minutes. We've realized that, that's probably enough for people, but it's micro content and it's very, very specific. So curated content for a curated community. So, and then we've just introduced the threads feature, which is like, Twitter was, because we want to keep the conversation going between the live sessions so that you can then keep commenting whenever you like. So again, it's about building communities, sharing information, doing it efficiently, doing it across the world.
Okay. So I'm going to try and maybe throw some questions at you as someone maybe who's thinking about joining the app, and will maybe have based on, I guess, what questions people would have. So for example, if I have just graduated from university, as I have this year, and there might be someone who is thinking about either doing a training contract now or starting their SQE or equivalent, that sort of stuff, and they're thinking, okay, for example, I have an interest in property, that maybe real estate, I want to kind of enter that. Would they then join the platform and go straight into that forum and then watch the videos? How do you, all can you do everything and then make a decision?
Yes, at the moment, I mean, don't get me wrong, we don't have a forum yet in real estate, for example, but
Yeah.
we will hopefully in time. And
Mhm.
what we would encourage people to do is just join, listen in. We just did a legal career a week back in April, where we specifically designed content for graduates, helping you with, putting together your CV. We spoke with the early careers people. They came on the app and talked about what they were looking for in a CV, what was their process internally when they're selecting people, how they were using AI or not sometimes in that process. And then we actually went through interview prep techniques where we had, some young lawyers and, new graduates literally join us and say, okay, you got an elevator pitch, you got 3 minutes to tell us about yourself. And we did it live, and that was kind of interesting because people hadn't done that before. It's like,
Mm.
oh, on the spot now, what do I say? That's the real life in a lawyer. You're on the spot constantly and you've got to say something. So it was quite interesting. We had a number of firms on. So we do this all the time. We're going to do it again in September as well, when we're looking at, and then what was interesting as well, a number of people who attended our live sessions then wrote to the moderators who are employers, potential employers. So, and that was a way in which you can sort of get access to people, because if they don't look at their emails, or they're getting millions of emails, they're just ignoring yours. So exclusive access to a particular community, feedback, because quite often, unless you've got somebody in legal in your family or associated with you, it's very difficult to know how to go about this process, right? So we try and help you by giving examples of what certain firms, are looking for and how they're recruiting people.
Mm. Slightly play devil's advocate. Someone might be thinking that, for example, there are things like Legal Cheek or All About Law, a lot of other places which do things like legal career weeks. They bring on firms. There's also now a lot of firms themselves doing things like online open days, webinars, graduate recruitment talking about it. If someone is thinking, okay, why should I join Platform 9 when I have these opportunities available to me?
Yeah, you're totally right, and they all do wonderful things, and we absolutely not looking to replace them. I think it's wonderful. This ecosystem is ripe. What we're doing is kind of authentic, no, unrehearsed questions, answers. Yeah, I think more than anything else is about being able to get direct access easily. If some firms invite you up and have open days and some, and things like that. A lot of the content is fully available elsewhere. But then also when you get there, there's more content than just specifically for students. And the student focus has got to be, improving your soft skills, looking at your competitiveness, understanding the job market, really understanding what does it mean to be this aspect within law. And we're not just looking at training contracts. We also look at, next week, we've got Paul Levy's coming on to talk about alternative careers for lawyers in legal tech, for example. So we're not just looking at sort of the traditional sort of career that was out there. It's about, you guys have a plethora of new roles that are available to you that wouldn't necessarily have been available before. So we try and make that real. And then when you're preparing for your interviews, being able to listen into previous content about that specific practice area or issue means that instead of reading The Economist or the Financial Times or whatever you're told to read before you do an interview, to be on top of current affairs, you can actually listen in and kind of get a real sense for the issues that the practitioners are talking about in that area.
Okay. So I guess one aspect is the content, but more importantly, it's mainly the community and the people that you have access to as well, which can be other people accessing the app as well as the practitioners and those coming on to talk as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
And because there's no hierarchy, it's an ask me anything kind of situation where it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, and your background. We're very open to diverse kinds of questions. So we've really managed to put together some interesting people. Okay, a lot of it for example, in the UK, you might have a challenge because, um, you know, uh, there's a lot of the content might not necessarily be just UK or just UK training contract oriented. We have lawyers from all over the world, but they're also bringing in their experience, which could be trends that are coming to your jurisdiction as well. So yeah, I think it's about a more holistic, globally integrated way of looking at things.
I love that. I think, like you say, the world is becoming increasingly globally integrated, and it's becoming so key for us to not just know about what's happening in our area or in our region, but across the world, because, what happens in other regions affects us ultimately. So I think that that global knowledge is so key. I have a bit of a final question on the topic. I know that you just launched in February, but at the moment, is the app completely free, or are there ways that you think that in the future you can monetize parts of it as well?
At the moment, of course, the app is free. I mean, we're a startup, so it's very early days in terms of the app. As I said, we've got about 1,000 people on it right now. We would welcome everybody to go to the App Store or Google Play and just download it and come and play with it and give us your feedback. It would be great. We are about to push an upgrade next Monday to the App Store and Google. So I would maybe hold off a couple of weeks. The new version of the app is just so fabulous. It's got the features relating to threads. It means that the conversation can keep going. So I'm really excited about what we built next time round, which will be sort of give it a week or two and we'll see where it goes. But I don't know when you're going to publish this podcast, but I would hope sort of in July we'll have the new version up and running. More importantly is also, like, for people like yourself who are, natural sort of communicators and want to build a community, we are open to collaborating with people who want to build communities. So whether it's student organizations, alumni organizations, we've spoken to universities, law societies, law firms, law firm networks, legal tech, judiciary. This morning was another legal tech. I mean, constantly there's, it's really a medium that can be served for many parts of the profession. What I was very much hoping for was that we'd see sort of this crossover between maybe practitioners in-house with practitioners externally, with maybe regulators. We gather around the topic. We bring together people to the topic. We don't silo it according to where you sit in the profession. We bring you together because in that way, the weird and wacky comes out. And that's really, really important, is that there are opportunities for what we used to call the water cooler moment, where you bump into people in the office and you just exchange. Very difficult to get those water cooler moments, but those water cooler moments can be gold. Why? Because you get a different perspective on what you're working on. You get a different, oh, wow, what does it do? They do it like that. Oh, this is missing. Oh, we forgot that. All of that is really invaluable. And we have to find places in which we can continue to do that, which is what we're doing on the app.
And I think it was to the point that you made earlier, where you saw when you were working in Germany of like tax advisors, auditors, lawyers all working together. The issue sometimes you have in a law firm, I think, is people think that the world exists just in law and it's just the legal world and there's nothing outside of that. And it's actually when you either work in house or you work elsewhere, you realize, oh wow, there's so many other people, and all these people are so necessary for us to ultimately get to achieving success. And I think conversations like that with people in different points of their journey, doing different sorts of things, is really what we need. And especially for young lawyers or young professionals who are just understanding the industry they're starting in. For anyone who is on the app and maybe they use it for a couple of months or a couple of years, what feedback would you love to hear? Like, what would you have loved for them to have taken away from Platform9?
What I am hearing is people like the ability to ask questions directly. They like the ability to interact. So there's a lot of podcasting out there which we consume passively. So the idea of actively being able to participate in a conversation is something people are liking. For me, because it's conversational in nature, I want them to feel, I won't say cozy, but I want them to feel welcomed and at home. So you walk away with a feeling that you're not alone in the profession. Whatever issues you're going through, somebody's maybe gone through it before, right? You're not alone. There are people equally who are passionate about the law, who love what they're doing. It is a difficult job. It is always going to be a difficult job, and it requires a certain mindset. But when you love what you're doing and you're passionate, you're interested, and your clients, you're being validated by your colleagues and your clients, it's a wonderful thing. And I think we need to, in an age of AI, where the role is now being questioned and is changing, I think, and one of, back to hope and motivation, is this is a human first business and industry to start with. It's human. Our relationships with each other are always going to matter. Our relationships we're here to serve our clients, right?
Yeah.
AI is an enabler. It is going to ideally make us more efficient, more effective. But we are at the core of what that profession is. And and this is a tool that, because it's voice, human, we're nurturing human connectivity. So you asked me, for me, it's really about how people feel when they get off a session. They realize, okay, that wasn't a waste of my time. It wasn't a waste. I've learned something new and interesting there. I've liked the feeling. I've liked the exposure to people in different parts of the world who are different to me. I think that's also really important. And I'll come back and play again.
I love that. I think, we started the conversation with your superpower being those connecting those dots and then having that connection. And I think that's exactly what the platform is doing. And I'm going to download it as soon as the update comes out and get on it myself as well. So thank you so much for coming on today, Patricia, and telling us a bit about your journey as well as everything you're doing at the moment. It sounds super exciting. And I know that you're going to, in the next couple of years, it's going to fly. So thank you so much for your time.
I've loved it, and the best of luck to you. Well done so far, and good luck with your training contract, and we'll be in touch.
And on that note, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and a massive shout out to Patricia for coming on Commerce Meets Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please do let me know by emailing commercemeetslaw@gmail.com or with a DM on Instagram at Commerce Meets Law. And you can also reach out to us on our website, which will be linked down in the description as well. Finally, for extra summer content, do check out the Commerce Meets Law YouTube channel, where I've also uploaded the episode I was talking about at the start of this episode, where I spoke about my experience at the University of Exeter, and also on our TikTok, where we upload short form content of all of our video episodes. For now, take care, goodbye, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.